What just happened? That was the question echoing in the sealed cockpits of America's most advanced fighter jets. High over the desert of Nevada, the pilots of Phoenix Squadron had done everything by the book. They had tracked, locked, and fired. The missiles streaked away, tails of fire painting the night sky, and then nothing. The craft ahead of them did not explode, did not evade, did not even flinch. It simply was, as though the very laws of motion, of force and consequence, did not apply. For the men and women in those cockpits, it was a moment that stripped away the certainty of training, technology, and trust in physics itself. What do you do when the most powerful weapons in your arsenal strike true, and the target keeps flying? Tonight, we drift into that silence, into the wide Nevada ranges, where the desert glows beneath the stars and radar screens hum with their quiet green pulse. We will move slowly, gently through testimony and whisper, through sterile reports and human voices, through the fragile balance between secrecy and wonder. The Phoenix Squadron Intercept was never announced in headlines. It did not become a press conference or a public revelation. Instead, it lingers in transcripts, in fragments of declassified chatter, in the memories of those who looked up from their scopes and said, "I saw something that should not exist." Settle yourself now. Let the room around you soften. Let the hum of your own breath become like the hum of distant engines. Together we will trace the path of that night. From radar shadows to the rush of afterburners, from the confusion of cockpit comms to the long corridors of debriefing rooms, where voices drop to whispers and silence weighs heavier than truth. This is not a story about proving nor disproving. It is about the quiet weight of mystery, about the way it feels when the sky itself refuses to obey. The desert is vast enough to hold its secrets, and tonight so are we. So close your eyes if you wish. Picture the great sweep of Nevada beneath the stars, the mountains low and dark, the sands pale and endless, the air cold and still. Above it all, the watchful arcs of aircraft, sleek, gray, and silent, carving their paths across the night. In those cockpits, young pilots steady their breathing, eyes flicking between glowing instruments and the dark expanse outside. Somewhere out there, a craft without wings or heat signature moves as it pleases. And so begins the story of the Phoenix Squadron, of the night when F-35s, say, the pinnacle of human engineering, confronted something that defied every manual, every weapon, every expectation. A story that remains, to this day, less about combat and more about the mystery of what we cannot touch, cannot stop, cannot explain. Now let us begin. Chapter 1. Radar Shadows. Over the desert. The desert at night is a place of vast silences. The air cools quickly after sunset, falling from the heat of day into a chill that creeps across the sand. The mountains turn black, their ridges sharp against the pale silver wash of starlight. Somewhere far off, a coyote lifts its voice into the emptiness, a solitary sound swallowed by the great open sky. Across this expanse lies the Nevada Test and Training Range, a restricted sweep of land larger than some countries. Few places on Earth are so carefully watched. Towers bristle with antennae. Radar domes gleam white in the moonlight, and in low, windowless buildings, men and women sit before glowing screens, watching the skies. Inside one of those control rooms, the atmosphere is steady, almost meditative. The hum of electronics fills the background. The air is cool and recycled, carrying the faint scent of coffee that has been sitting too long. Operators speak in quiet tones, voices clipped, professional, every phrase following a script refined by decades of protocol. On the screens before them, the world is translated into points of light, blips that drift and cross against the sweep of a radar beam. Most of it is ordinary. Commercial air traffic, far to the west, climbing toward their cruise altitudes. Training flights already logged, their transponders pinging back identification codes. And then something else. It begins as a flicker, a return that should not be there. Not strong, not clear, but consistent enough to notice. The operator leans forward, adjusting the gain, watching as the faint mark shifts, accelerates, then seems to stop dead in the air. No transponder, no signal, no match in the cataloged schedules. He marks it once, twice, 3 times. The contact reappears each sweep. Only now, it has moved nearly 40 miles in less than a minute. Too fast for a conventional aircraft, too controlled to be dismissed as weather clutter. The call goes out calmly, the words practiced and level. Unidentified contact. Grid reference marked. Request secondary confirmation. Across the room, another operator nods, checks a separate system. His screen shows the same. A ghost, but one with consistency. A shadow that moves with intent. There is no alarm yet. No raised voices. Only the tightening focus of trained eyes. In this world, everything unusual is logged, tracked, evaluated. Most anomalies resolve into harmless explanations. A miscalibrated return. A civilian plane straying off course. But every once in a while, something remains. The desert outside is silent. Stars burn in their endless arcs. But here, in the control room, tension builds quietly, like static before a storm. Supervisors are called. Lines of communication open between stations. And as the contact darts again, this time vanishing, then reappearing 70 miles north in the span of seconds, the weight of the situation grows heavier. A decision is made, not quickly, but with the cold precision of protocol. If the contact cannot be explained, it must be intercepted. Phones ring in ready rooms. Pilots already suited for training missions receive new orders. Phoenix Squadron, a flight of advanced F-35, is directed to climb into the night and meet the impossible. The operators continue to watch their screens as the jets begin their taxi, their blips appearing like small signatures of fire against the background noise. And still, the unknown craft moves, silent, impossible, unclaimed, above the ranges of Nevada. Engines stir the night awake. On the runway at Nellis Air Force Base, the first F-35 glides forward, its canopy catching a faint reflection of desert stars. The sound builds from a low murmur into a controlled roar, not explosive, but steady, like the breath of some giant animal restrained by metal and fuel. One after another, the squadron begins its climb. Phoenix 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 call signs, 4 pilots, each carrying the calm of countless training sorties and the weight of orders that carry no explanation. From the outside, their departure looks routine. To an observer at the edge of the base, it would be just another night patrol, the kind that happens so often the desert barely notices. But inside the cockpits, there is an edge of something else, a quiet awareness that what they've been asked to intercept isn't normal. The helmets they wear are marvels of technology. Information projects directly onto the visor, airspeed, altitude, heading, radar data, even the terrain scrolling beneath them in glowing green relief. Each blink and breath is tracked, each movement translated into seamless control. And tonight, all of that cutting-edge precision is focused on a single anomaly, Phoenix 1 Airborne. The voice is steady over comms, clipped and calm. Phoenix 2, airborne. 3 airborne. 4 airborne. One by one, the jets lift into the sky, afterburners leaving faint trails of heat distortion in the cool desert air. The ground falls away, a patchwork of darkness broken by thin rivers of light where highways stretch toward distant towns. Above them the stars are sharp, undisturbed, vast. The lead pilot, Phoenix 1, watches his radar display as a faint marker pulses on the edge of range. It should not be there. No transponder code, no flight plan, no speed that makes sense. Control Phoenix 1. Contact confirmed. Bearing 320, Angels 25, moving fast. Back in the control room, the operators acknowledge the blip they have been following is now mirrored on the fighter's instruments, solid and undeniable. Phoenix Squadron turns as one, banking smoothly into the heading. Their formation stretches like an arrow across the night. Copy that. Phoenix, you are cleared to intercept. Rules of engagement: remain monitor only unless directed otherwise. There is a pause on the line, just a heartbeat longer than usual, as if even the controller is weighing the strangeness of what is unfolding. The pilots press on. Through the canopies, the desert sprawls below, ridges, dry lake beds, forgotten roads that wind through empty miles. The glow of Las Vegas hangs faint on the horizon, a reminder of a world unaware of what moves above it. The target shifts again. On the displays, it jumps 60 miles in seconds, then halts, suspended at a point no aircraft should be able to hold without stalling. Phoenix 2's voice breaks the quiet. Control, be advised that contact just skipped. Velocity reads off the scale. The reply is level, almost mechanical. Copy. Continue intercept. The squadron climbs higher. Air grows thin. The lights of the ground blur into obscurity. Every pilot scans both instruments and the dark outside, looking for a hint, a glimmer, a shadow, anything that matches the impossible readings. Then ahead, something glows faintly against the horizon. Not a beacon, not the heat signature of jet exhaust, more like a shimmer, as if the night itself had bent and folded into an outline. Visual contact, Phoenix 1 says quietly. The others adjust their course, eyes narrowing. For the first time, what had been only a radar ghost becomes something real. And in the silence of the desert sky, Phoenix Squadron closes in. The closer they drew, the stranger it became. The shimmer ahead did not behave like light from an aircraft or reflection from metal. It seemed to fold in and out of itself, like heat rising off asphalt, but sharper, more deliberate. The edges were too precise to be mirage, too structured to be dismissed as distortion. Phoenix 1 steadied his breathing. His visor display painted a faint lock around the object, a box flickering as the sensors struggled to define it. Range markers jumped wildly. Speed indicators blinked between 0 and impossible. Control Phoenix 1, target within 20 miles. Visual confirmation of unknown craft. The words were calm, but the cockpit was anything but ordinary. His heart tapped faster, his hands adjusting throttle and stick with deliberate care. Out of the shimmer, a shape began to emerge. At first, it was nothing more than a curve, like the suggestion of a disc, then a fuller outline, smooth, seamless, without wings or tail, a body of dull silver, reflecting almost nothing, as though it swallowed starlight instead of casting it back. Phoenix 2's voice came through, hushed even over comms. I have visual. What the hell is that? It hovered motionless, suspended high above the desert floor. The jets closed in, engines humming steady, their formation tightening as if instinctively drawing strength from one another. Every instrument strained to measure it, but the data was nonsense. Radar showed the object at one range, infrared at another. LiDAR sweeps failed to return anything at all, as if the craft simply wasn't there. Yet the pilot's eyes told them otherwise. Control Phoenix 2. No emissions detected. No heat signature. Object is cold. The lead pilot narrowed his eyes. Through the canopy, the craft seemed larger than expected, perhaps 100 feet across. Its surface bore no markings, no seams, no indication of propulsion, just a single steady glow along its underside, a pale blue-white radiance that pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. Phoenix 3 whispered, almost to himself, "It's just hanging there." They circled, keeping distance, eyes wide, breaths shallow. Training dictated professionalism, calm observation, reporting of data, but training had not prepared them for this. In the silence between transmissions, only the sound of their own breathing filled the helmets. The desert below rolled endlessly, indifferent, while above the object remained perfectly still. Phoenix Squadron, maintain observation. Do not engage unless directed. The voice from control was steady, but carried a weight beneath it, as though the controller himself had no words for what he was relaying. Phoenix 4 broke formation slightly, easing closer, sensors straining for a clearer lock. The moment he did, the craft shifted. Not fast, not violent, but sudden. In an instant it leapt several miles to the side, reappearing as though space itself had folded. All four pilots gasped. A collective sound caught over the net. Contact. Just jumped. Repeat. Contact displaced instantly. Range now 15 miles east. The object hovered there again, serene, unbothered, as though mocking the limits of technology around it. For the first time, Phoenix Squadron understood. They were not intercepting in the usual sense. They were chasing something that did not need to be chased. The desert sky, vast and silent, had become a stage, and the impossible craft was writing its own rules. Chapter 2. The Impossible Chase. Engines thunder as Phoenix Squadron fans wide, each jet tracing a clean arc through the Nevada night. The object hovers still, pale light pulsing against the dark. Every instinct tells the pilots to close in, to test its reactions, to learn what they can before the unknown slips away again. Phoenix 1. Initiating intercept run. The leader's voice is calm, though his pulse hammers against the restraints of training. His jet tilts, nose down slightly, throttle eased forward. Phoenix 2 mirrors the move, while 3 and 4 swing wide to box the target from both sides. The desert stretches endlessly below. Dry lake beds gleam faintly in moonlight, pale scars against the earth. Ridges roll black and jagged, their shadows stretching like fingers. From above, the land looks ancient, indifferent, as if it has seen such mysteries before and will see them again. On their displays, the object dances. It moves not with speed, but with decision. One moment still, the next a blur to the left, then frozen again, as though space itself allows it shortcuts. The jets push harder, afterburners glowing, their human engines straining to match. Phoenix 2 exhales sharply into his mic. I'm showing displacement faster than sensor can lock. No vector, just gone, then there again. The pilots exchange clipped confirmations, voices low, professional, yet behind the precision, awe creeps in, awe and a rising edge of disbelief. From the control room, the steady cadence continues. Phoenix Squadron, maintain pursuit. Data link recording. All telemetry active. But even those words carry tension, as though the controllers, safe on the ground, can hardly believe the streams of impossible numbers flowing across their screens. Phoenix 3 angles his jet downward, then climbs sharply, testing altitude response. The object reacts, not evasively, but curiously, shifting upward in a smooth glide, as if acknowledging the maneuver. Then, without warning, it accelerates straight up. In seconds, it clears 30,000 feet, then halts midair. Contact just jumped vertical, holding at Angels 50. The voice is strained, the human limits of the F-35 already tested. The squadron pulls higher, engines roaring, cockpits vibrating with effort, and then it happens again. The craft slides instantly, not streaking, not climbing, but simply appearing miles to the east. No contrails, no sonic boom, no transition. Phoenix 4 whispers, barely audible over the comms. Physics doesn't allow that. The others say nothing. Silence hangs heavy, broken only by breathing and the rush of air against fuselage. Below them, the desert is vast, dotted by faint pinpricks of isolated towns, each unaware of the silent drama playing above. From this height, highways appear as faint threads of light, vehicles crawling slowly, oblivious to the pursuit, tearing across the sky. The object shifts again, this time moving ahead of Phoenix 1's nose. For a moment it seems to wait, pulsing faintly, its underside glow flickering in a steady rhythm. It holds long enough for every pilot to register its presence directly. Then, with a sudden lateral jump, it slides sideways at a velocity no jet could ever achieve, confirming instantaneous lateral displacement. Object remains stable. The words feel hollow even as they're spoken, as though saying them aloud makes them less real. Phoenix Squadron banks again, engines straining, instruments blinking warnings as they press the chase. But deep inside, each pilot already knows they are not the hunters here. They are witnesses. The desert night is no longer silent. It thrums with the impossible. The decision comes quietly, without drama, as if it were just another line in a checklist. Phoenix 1 cleared for weapons test. Single shot, confirm lock. The words hang in the cockpit, steady but heavy. The pilot acknowledges. Voice level, copy. Arming 1. On his display, a box flickers around the target. The sensors strain to hold it, crosshairs blinking, lock tone wavering between sure and lost. His thumb hovers over the switch. The sky is silent, stars glimmering. The desert below offers no witness but stone and sand. Fox 3. Phoenix 1 calls. A missile drops clean from the wing, then ignites, streaking forward in a line of fire. The others track it visually, their helmets turning in unison. The missile's motor glows against the dark, the faint contrail curling in the thin air. Its seeker chirps, guiding itself toward the impossible. For 3 seconds, it looks textbook. Then, as the weapon closes, the craft shifts, not evasively, not defensively. It simply moves aside, one instant here, the next there. The missile sails past emptiness, its guidance blind, and detonates harmlessly far above the desert. A bright flare blooms against the stars, fades and dies. Phoenix 2 speaks, clipped. Missile impact negative, target unaffected. No one says what they are thinking, that the object hadn't dodged. It hadn't fought back. It had simply ignored the attack, as though the laws binding every aircraft, every weapon, meant nothing to it. The command center breaks in, voice even. Phoenix Squadron, continue, record all data. Phoenix 2 cleared to engage. The second jet rolls slightly, selecting his own weapon. Fox 3, he calls, and another missile leaps into the night. This time, the craft remains visible, pulsing faintly as if waiting. The missile closes, shrieking through the thin air, guidance light steady. At the last instant, the object vanishes. The missile detonates against the coordinates of a ghost. Telemetry records the blast. The desert trembles faintly below as shockwaves ripple through the air. But when the smoke clears, the object is there again, undisturbed, 10 miles away, glowing faint and serene. Phoenix 3's voice is quiet, almost reverent. It doesn't even care. In the cockpits, hands tighten on controls, eyes darting between sensors and the strange glow ahead. Training urges another attempt. Human pride demands a result. But deep within, each pilot feels the futility. Still, orders carry weight. Phoenix 3 cleared hot. Engage. The third missile streaks away, carving its path across the heavens. For a heartbeat, the desert sky feels alive with fire, metal chasing the unknown. The craft makes no move. The missile closes, the range collapsing. Then, with a flicker, the object slides downward at impossible speed, halts, and resumes its place as though nothing had passed. The missile bursts in empty air above, leaving only a fading blossom of flame. 3 launches, 3 misses, each one perfect in its mechanics, each one meaningless against a target that bends the very rules they were built upon. Phoenix 4 whispers into comms, "What are we even fighting?" There is no reply, only the hiss of static and the sound of their own breathing. The desert below lies unchanged. The stars burn without comment, and the object floats still, silent and steady, as though indifferent to the most advanced weapons humanity can offer. The chase is no longer about victory. It has become something else: observation, witness, the weight of impossibility hanging in the Nevada sky. The sky is quiet again, only the low hum of turbines and the soft rasp of oxygen masks break the silence inside the cockpits. 3 missiles spent, 3 perfect launches, and the object still drifts, pale light pulsing softly, as if unaware it has even been challenged. Phoenix 1 steadies his breathing, adjusting his grip on the throttle. Training says to report, to request further instruction, but words feel hollow against what he has just seen. His display continues to track the object, though its readings flicker like static, as if the sensors themselves are uncertain whether it exists. "Control," he says finally, voice flat, weapons ineffective, target remains intact. No observed damage. The reply is delayed. On the ground, controllers whisper among themselves, consulting protocols that were never written for this. When the voice returns, it is measured. Phoenix Squadron, continue observation. No further engagement at this time. The order brings both relief and unease. Relief, because firing again would only deepen the futility. Unease, because it means the object is free to move as it pleases. The pilots regroup, closing formation slightly, keeping the craft within sight. They fly parallel, maintaining distance, circling slowly in the desert night. The object hovers, indifferent, its glow steady against the starlight. Phoenix 2 breaks the silence first. It's like it wanted us to try, just to show us. Phoenix 3 answers, his tone hushed, like it was never in danger. They fall quiet again, words inadequate. Each pilot knows what his instruments show. Each knows what his eyes confirm. The desert below stretches endlessly, a canvas for the impossible. Dry lake beds shimmer faintly. Highways crawl with headlights of motorists who will never know what moves above them. From this height, The world seems small, fragile, and above it, the craft floats like a question without answer. Phoenix 4 adjusts course slightly, his voice low. If it wanted to, it could have been gone already. Or worse, he does not say the word attack. He doesn't have to. The silence after his words is heavy enough. The object shifts again, not fast, not violent, just a slow glide sideways, as if repositioning. No jet wash, no sound, no hint of thrust. It drifts across the sky, as lightly as a leaf across water. The F-35s mirror the movement, banking carefully, keeping pace. Each motion feels rehearsed, like dancers following a partner far beyond their skill. Phoenix 1 allows himself a breath, eyes fixed on the glow ahead. For the first time in his career, he feels the weight of insignificance. The jet beneath him is the pinnacle of engineering: stealth, speed, sensors, weapons. Yet tonight, it is no more than a camera, a recorder of something that cannot be explained. The comms fall silent. There are no more checklists, no more procedures to lean on, only the hum of machines and the beating of hearts. High over Nevada, Phoenix Squadron understands a truth that will never make its way into manuals or briefings. They are no longer intercepting, they are witnessing. The desert below, vast and ancient, accepts the secret without question. The stars above continue their slow march, and between them floats the impossible, a reminder that the sky holds more than we are ready to name. Chapter 3: Memory in the Black Box. When Phoenix Squadron finally returned to base, the desert was still dark, the stars still steady overhead, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. The F-35C taxied in silence, their canopies reflecting hangar lights as ground crews approached with the usual precision. Yet for the pilots, the night had shifted into something that could never be routine again. Engines wound down, turbines cooling with a slow metallic sigh. Helmets were lifted, visors clicked open, and faces appeared, drawn, pale, their expressions caught between discipline and disbelief. None of them spoke at first. There was nothing to say that would fit the confines of ordinary language. Technicians moved briskly, connecting power carts, downloading data from the jets. Every flight is recorded in detail. Radar sweeps, sensor logs, comms chatter, the subtle metrics of stress on airframes. Tonight, those black boxes carried something stranger: tracks and recordings of a craft that should not have existed. The pilots walked across the tarmac toward the debriefing rooms, their boots echoing softly. Behind them, the jets sat in neat rows, their matte gray skins gleaming faintly under sodium lamps. To any observer, it looked like another training sortie completed. Only those who had seen the object knew the weight hanging in the air. Inside, the debriefing was held in a windowless room with low fluorescent lights, a long table, notepads placed neatly, a bank of screens at the far wall, ready to replay data frame by frame. The atmosphere was sterile, almost clinical, yet the air felt heavy, as if something unspoken pressed down on everyone present. The squadron commander began with procedure. Mission report, Phoenix 1. Walk us through. The lead pilot sat straighter, his voice level, recounting what he could. He spoke of the first radar contact, the approach, the visual confirmation. He described the object's smooth surface, its pale blue light, its impossible displacements. Each phrase was careful, professional, stripped of emotion. The others added their confirmations, their accounts weaving into a tapestry that left no room for error. They had all seen the same thing. Their sensors had all recorded the same anomalies, Their missiles had all failed the same way. On the screens, radar plots appeared. Lines traced in pale green showed the F-35s moving clean arcs across the desert sky. And there, interwoven, were the impossible jumps of the unidentified craft. No acceleration curves, no vectors, just sudden displacements, as though a hand had lifted the object and set it down elsewhere. Analysts leaned forward, taking notes, whispering quietly. The pilots sat in silence, their hands clasped before them, listening to the sound of their own voices played back through the comms logs. Each breath, each clipped report, captured forever in digital memory. Fox 3, missile away. The phrase echoed from the speakers. Moments later, telemetry showed the weapon detonating against empty air. The replay continued. Each launch, each failure, each impossible jump of the craft, as though mocking the effort. When the recording ended, the room was still. One of the analysts finally spoke. No evidence of damage. Target unaffected. Behavior inconsistent with known aerial vehicles. The words were deliberately bland, stripped of awe, but they carried the weight of acknowledgement. What had been seen could not be erased. It could only be filed, categorized, sealed. The pilots were dismissed with quiet thanks. Their words were already being transcribed, their voices reduced to text that would be stamped and stored. Outside the debriefing room, the night air felt cooler, fresher, but no lighter. Each of them knew the truth. The black boxes carried their memory now, but the meaning of what they had seen would slip into silence. Above the desert, the stars still burned, and somewhere out there, perhaps the craft drifted still, unbothered by missiles or men, leaving only echoes in the machines built to measure it. The analysts worked in silence, their faces lit by the glow of monitors. Frame by frame, second by second, they replayed the night's encounter. Numbers scrolled endlessly down the screens. Altitude, heading, velocity, radar strength. The data was meant to bring clarity, to pin events into neat columns of certainty. But the more they studied, the less sense it made. A missile launch should leave clear signatures: acceleration, pursuit curves, detonation markers. Tonight, the signatures were there, perfect in their mechanics. But alongside them were anomalies no physics textbook could explain. The object's position did not trace smooth arcs. It appeared, disappeared, reappeared miles away, each shift instantaneous. There was no acceleration curve, no thrust spike, no sonic boom. Even the instruments seemed confused, reporting impossible velocity 1 second and 0 knots the next. One analyst scribbled in his notes, his handwriting tight, displacement events inconsistent with known propulsion. Another shook his head, muttering quietly to no one in particular. We're chasing ghosts. Yet the data was real. The jets had burned real fuel. The missiles had been expended. The pilots' voices, captured in black box recorders, carried the unmistakable strain of witnesses seeing something beyond their training. Around the table, senior officers watched with practiced calm. Their expressions revealed little, but their silence carried weight. This was not the first time such footage had been laid before them. They knew the rhythm, the anomaly, the confirmation, the failure to explain. One of them finally spoke, his voice even, flagged similarities to prior cases. The analysts exchanged quick glances. Prior cases. The phrase was broad, covering decades of sightings, encounters, reports filed quietly and stored where few would ever see them. Each one different, yet somehow the same. In one folder, someone pulled up a comparison. Radar tracks from the Pacific, dated years earlier, showing small blips darting with the same impossible jumps. Another chart appeared, recordings from the East Coast, where Navy pilots had watched tic-tac shapes accelerate and stop without inertia. The patterns aligned eerily well. The room fell quiet again. There was no need to say aloud what everyone saw. The shapes of the anomalies matched across time and place. Different skies, different pilots, different equipment, but the same impossible behavior. The pilots of Phoenix Squadron sat at the edge of the room, silent now, their part of the story told. They listened as their experience was folded into a larger pattern, reduced to charts and comparisons. For them, the memory was still vivid, the glow against the stars, the sense of futility as weapons failed. For the analysts, it became data, points on a graph, another entry in a growing archive. Yet even as the charts stacked higher, one truth lingered. The data explained nothing. Technology had measured, recorded, confirmed, and still the craft remained untouched, beyond reach. One of the younger technicians leaned closer to his screen, replaying the final moments. He zoomed in, frame by frame, on the object's glow as it shifted positions. For an instant, he thought he saw something, a faint distortion around it, as though space itself bent. He hesitated before noting it down, aware how such speculation would read in an official report. He wrote simply, "Anomalous optical effect." The senior officer closed his folder with care. "Prepare the transcript. Draft preliminary summary. Distribution limited." His tone left no room for discussion. The meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped quietly. Papers were gathered. Screens powered down. The black box memory would be copied, sealed, archived. The reports would circulate only among those with clearance, high enough to know such things existed. Outside, the desert night stretched silent and vast. The encounter was already slipping from words into silence, from memory into secrecy. Only the pilots carried the weight of having seen it directly, knowing their testimony had joined a chain of whispers stretching back decades. In the end, the data was precise. The mystery was not. The official debrief was over, but the night stayed with them. Pilots drifted from the briefing room into the cool desert air, their boots tapping softly against the concrete. Beyond the floodlit hangars, the horizon was black and endless, the stars sharp as pinpricks. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and human, more honest than anything they had been able to say inside. Phoenix, too, was the first to break it. He leaned against the side of his jet, helmet cradled under one arm, and let out a long breath. Not a scratch. It didn't even move like it cared. Phoenix 3 rubbed at his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. "I saw it too, clear as day. I'll swear on it till the end of my career. But you know how it'll go." He gestured toward the building they had just left. "Paperwork will say anomalous radar contact, maybe unidentified aerial activity. Nothing more." The lead pilot, Phoenix 1, remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the sky. He was older than the others, a veteran of more sorties, more training exercises, more long nights in the cockpit. His voice, when it came, was calm but distant. "It wasn't about us. That's what I can't shake. It was like it allowed us to see it, allowed us to try, but it was never really there for us." The others fell silent again. His words echoed the feeling they had each carried in the air, the strange impression that the craft was not being hunted, but simply observed. Later, in the dim quiet of the ready rooms, each pilot sat alone with his thoughts. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only stillness, They wrote notes for the official record, stripped of emotion, pared down to the essentials. But in the spaces between those lines, memories flickered, the pale blue glow against the stars, the sudden jumps that made space feel like water, folding and rippling at will. The way missiles, perfect machines of precision, had become useless fireworks in the desert sky. For Phoenix 4, the youngest, it was the silence that lingered. In training, combat always carried noise, explosions, warnings, the chaos of physics at work. Tonight, there had been none. No roar, no shockwave, no debris, just stillness. The absence of consequence. He lay back on the narrow bunk in the squadron quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sight over and over. His heart still beat faster when he remembered how the object had shifted, instantly without motion. He whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear, "How do you fight something that doesn't play by the same rules?" The desert outside remained indifferent. Wind swept across dry lake beds, rattling brush. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, as they always would, but for those 4 pilots, the sky had changed. They would sleep eventually, though fitfully, dreams filled with pale lights and shifting horizons. In the morning, the routine would continue, briefings, checklists, flights. But beneath it all, a new weight would remain, the memory of chasing something untouchable, something that answered no missile, no lock, no human hand. And though their voices had been recorded, transcribed, sealed in official silence, each of them knew the truth would live longer inside them than in any archive. The black boxes had captured the data, the reports would capture the words, but only memory carried the all. Chapter 4: Patterns in Silence. The Desert Night was only one chapter in a story far larger than the Phoenix Squadron. Long before their F-35s traced arcs across Nevada, others had looked to the sky and reported movements that made no sense. Encounters separated by years, oceans, and cultures carried the same shape, the same rhythm of awe, disbelief, and silence that followed. In the early 2000s, over the Pacific, Navy aviators recorded what became known as the Tic Tac encounter. The descriptions were simple but haunting: a white, capsule-shaped craft darting effortlessly above the ocean, accelerating in ways no jet could match. Radar logs confirmed what eyes had seen. One pilot described it breaking from 60,000 feet to near sea level in seconds, a maneuver that should have crushed any physical object. Yet there it was, hovering low, indifferent to the most advanced aircraft in the fleet. Decades earlier, another desert had its night of wonder. In 1997, thousands in Arizona looked up to see lights stretched in formation across the sky. Entire neighborhoods gathered on rooftops, pointing, whispering, watching as the Phoenix lights moved silently overhead. Pilots flying commercial routes called them in. Ordinary citizens filled phone lines with reports. For hours the lights lingered, vast and deliberate, before fading into the night. Official explanations leaned toward flares, training exercises, dismissals, but the people who had seen it knew that explanation did not match the scale, the stillness, the quiet presence of something vast moving across their state. Across the Atlantic, in a quiet English forest in 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge found themselves chasing lights through the trees. Rendlesham Forest became its own legend, its testimonies filled with details of glowing objects, strange markings on the ground, even radiation spikes measured where the craft was said to have landed. Tapes from that night still carry the clipped voices of men trained to remain calm, describing lights darting between trees and a silent craft hovering close enough to touch. Their words, like Phoenix Squadrons, were professional, stripped of exaggeration, and all the more haunting for it. Again and again, the pattern repeats. A craft moves beyond comprehension. Technology records what human eyes cannot deny. And afterward, the silence spreads, reports filed away, official explanations offered, witnesses left with memories that outweigh the words allowed on paper. The Phoenix Squadron knew none of this as they climbed into their jets that night. For them, the encounter was new, raw, alive. But in the larger tapestry, their experience was a thread woven into something older, larger, enduring. The desert does not distinguish between decades. The same stars that shone over Nevada in the 21st century burned above Arizona in 1997, above Suffolk in 1980, above the Pacific in 2004. To those who witnessed, the sky carried the same message that something else moves among us, watching, waiting, refusing to be bound by the rules we believe unbreakable. And always, afterward, comes the silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of restraint, the careful weighing of words, the transcripts filed into drawers, the voices that fall quiet rather than risk disbelief. What Phoenix Squadron saw was new to them, but it was not new to history. It was part of a rhythm, a pattern that stretches across continents and decades. The names change, the details shift, the craft vary in shape, in color, in light, but the essence remains the same. The skies give a glimpse, humans record what they can, and the truth drifts back into silence. Testimony is fragile. It begins as a moment of honesty, a man or woman describing what they have seen, what they cannot forget. But once spoken, it takes on a weight, subject to doubt, to ridicule, to dismissal. And so, across the years, countless witnesses to the extraordinary have learned the same lesson: speak carefully or fall silent. The pilots of Phoenix Squadron were not the first to carry this burden. In 1952, during a summer when the skies over Washington, D.C. were alive with strange lights, radar operators at National Airport watched blips appear and vanish, darting across their screens in ways no aircraft could match. Jet interceptors were scrambled again and again. Each time, pilots reported lights streaking past their canopies, beyond pursuit. At a press conference, officials spoke of temperature inversions, atmospheric quirks that fooled the eye. But the men in the radar rooms knew the difference between weather and structured returns. They had logged the impossible and then watched as it was filed away as nothing. Years later, in 1967, in a small Canadian town near Falcon Lake, a prospector named Stephen McCulloch stumbled upon a landed craft on a granite outcrop. He described its surface as seamless, metallic, and alive with heat. When a vent opened, it blasted him with a grid of radiation that burned into his chest. His injuries were documented, photographed, undeniable. Yet when investigators came, they asked less about his pain than about what he had collected. The shirt, the soil, the fragments of strange metal. Later, two men in dark suits appeared at his door, knowing his name, his doctor, even the hospital where he had been treated. They spoke calmly, politely, but their presence pressed him into silence more effectively than threats ever could. The shape of these stories never changes. A sighting, a record, whether in photograph, radar track, or burn mark, And then the visitors, sometimes official, sometimes nameless, who ensure the story fades. Even civilians, far from military chains of command, feel the same pattern. In 1965, a teacher in Florida named Shirley Cromartie saw a disk drift over the schoolyard in the morning light. She mentioned it casually in the staff room, only to find two men at her door days later, pale, expressionless, questioning her with mechanical precision. They asked if she had told anyone else, if she had photographs, if she had collected fragments. When she denied it, they instructed her simply, "Do not speak of it again." And so she didn't. Not to her colleagues, not even to her family. Only in whispers, decades later, did fragments of her story surface. What ties together Rendlesham, the Phoenix Lights, Tic Tac, Falcon Lake, Washington, D.C., and the Nevada desert is not only the craft, it is the silence afterward. A silence heavier than denial, more enduring than ridicule. It is the quiet that settles over witnesses who know what they saw, but also know the cost of speaking too loudly. The Phoenix Squadron returned to base with black box data and radar plots, but behind the sterile recordings lay the same weight carried by radar operators in 1952, by civilians in 1965, by prospector and pilot alike. The weight of awe tangled with futility, the realization that testimony might live in memory forever, but in public it would dissolve into the same pattern of disbelief and dismissal. And yet, across decades and continents, the testimonies echo each other like whispers in a long corridor, different voices, different languages, but always the same shape of silence. Silence is its own kind of language. It carries weight, heavier sometimes than words or denials. For those who encounter the unknown, silence becomes a companion, a shadow that lingers long after the sight of strange lights fades from the sky. The Phoenix Squadron knew this feeling the moment they stepped from their jets. In the debrief room, every phrase was measured, each word filtered into the neutral language of reports. But behind those clipped sentences lived something rawer, the shock of seeing physics bent into new shapes, the unease of realizing that missiles could become fireworks against the stars. None of that found its way into official transcripts. It lived instead in pauses, in the quiet spaces between sentences, in the long glances exchanged among those who had shared the sky that night. History is filled with similar pauses. The Rendlesham witnesses, their tape recorders filled with calm military voices, never raised their tones, never shouted. Yet beneath their clipped words was the unmistakable tremor of men facing something they could not explain. The pilots over Washington in 1952 never admitted fear in their logs, but the silence between their bursts of comms revealed what their training would not let them say aloud. Even civilians, like those who stood on rooftops beneath the Phoenix lights, often found themselves speaking softly afterward, their voices carrying the reverence of churchgoers. Perhaps the silence is part of the phenomenon itself. The craft appear, they move in ways beyond reach, and then they vanish, leaving not noise, not debris, but a hush that seeps into those who witness. The hush deepens into memory, and memory becomes more powerful than proof. For Phoenix Squadron, the silence took on new weight in the days that followed. They carried on with training missions, with maintenance schedules, with the ordinary rhythm of military life. Yet each time they suited up, strapped in, and lifted from the runway, they carried a quiet question with them. Would it return? Would the night sky open again to reveal the impossible? No one asked the question aloud. It lingered unspoken, like the faint hum in their helmets before comms came alive. That restraint, that choice not to name it, was not born of fear alone. It was also born of reverence. To speak too loudly of what they had seen felt like reducing it, flattening it into something less than it was. In the broader arc of history, their silence is a thread woven into many others, a tapestry of voices lowered, testimonies pared down, memories carried privately. The pattern is unmistakable. The sightings may change, the shapes of the craft may shift, the locations may range from deserts to forests to oceans, but the silence afterward remains the same, and perhaps that is the truest mystery. Not the speed, not the maneuvers, not the failures of missiles, but the way silence seems to follow these events like a shadow, a silence that presses down not only on those who saw, but on those who listen, a silence that resists explanation, just as the craft themselves resist capture. The Phoenix Squadron could not hold the object in their sights. History could not hold onto it in its reports. And yet, in the silence afterward, it endures, more persistent than flame, more lasting than data. The desert knows silence well. It carries it across the dunes, lets it rest in the dry lake beds, echoes it off canyon walls, and in that silence, the memory of the impossible takes root, waiting for the next time the sky opens and reminds us that we are not the only ones watching. Chapter 5. The Visitors, or the Mirror. There is a question that lingers whenever stories like Phoenix Squadrons are told. Are these things we see in the sky visitors, beings from beyond our world, crossing unimaginable distances to reach us? Or are they something stranger still, mirrors, reflecting back our own questions, our own fears, our own sense of wonder? The desert is an ancient stage for such mysteries. Long before radar screens and jet engines, the people of these lands looked up at the same stars and spoke of sky beings, of watchers who came and went in silence. The Hopi told of the Kachinas, spirits descending from the heavens, bringing knowledge and warning. In other traditions, luminous shapes were messengers, woven into ritual and story. The details shifted with each culture, but the feeling was always the same. The sky was not empty. It was alive with presence. For the pilots of Phoenix Squadron, the craft they faced was as real as the gauges on their dashboards. They measured it, tracked it, fired upon it. Yet afterward, when the adrenaline faded, the memory carried something more elusive. They felt watched, not threatened, not engaged in combat, but observed, as though the craft itself was less a machine and more a gaze turned back upon them. History offers parallels. When Kenneth Arnold first described the objects he saw over Mount Rainier in 1947, he spoke not only of their speed, but of their deliberate movement, like saucers skipping across water, dancing in a rhythm he could not follow. In Rendlesham, witnesses described not only the glow of lights among the trees, but a profound sense that they were being examined in return, that the encounter was not just sight, but a kind of dialogue. Perhaps this is why such encounters leave such deep impressions. They are not simply about flight mechanics or strange lights. They are about the way humans feel when confronted with something that refuses to behave like anything else in the sky. The awe, the unease, the silence that follows, all of it suggests that the real event is not just out there, but within us. Some researchers whisper that the craft behave less like vehicles and more like actors on a stage, shaping their appearances for the eyes that see them. To pilots, they appear technological, built for speed and maneuver. To civilians on the ground, they appear as lights, vast and silent. To ancient peoples, they came as spirits clothed in story. The details shift, but the core remains. Something appears, lingers, then departs, leaving us changed. The Phoenix Squadron might never know if the object was a machine from another star or a mirror held up to human perception. What they knew in their bones was that it had engaged them without firing, challenged them without threat, and left them questioning what it means to chase the unreachable. In the long history of such encounters, this duality remains visitor or mirror. The stars overhead remain silent, offering no answer, and yet perhaps the silence itself is the answer, a reminder that not every mystery is meant to be solved, that some are meant only to be witnessed, to draw us deeper into reflection. In the Nevada desert, the craft vanished into the night, leaving only data and memory. But within the hearts of those who chased it, a quieter realization endured. Perhaps what matters is not what it was, but what it revealed in them: awe, humility, and the recognition that human certainty is fragile when the sky decides to speak in riddles. The Nevada desert is more than empty land. It is a canvas, a stage, and sometimes a veil. By day, its ridges glow with heat, their shadows stretching across the flats. By night, its silence feels eternal, a silence where stories settle like sand. Within this vastness lies the perfect theater for both the myths of ancient peoples and the experiments of modern power. For centuries, the desert has carried legends of visitors. The Paiute told of Havmasuvs, beings who descended in shining boats, who could travel through the air without wings. Their stories, whispered across generations, spoke of technology so seamless it felt like magic. To outsiders, these tales were folklore, but to those who lived beneath the stars, they were memory. In the 20th century, the desert became home to secrets of a different kind. Fences rose, gates closed, and whole valleys were sealed under military jurisdiction. Area 51 became shorthand for both the cutting edge of aerospace and the shadows where truth hides. Experimental aircraft left contrails across the sky, shapes that sometimes blended into the realm of myth themselves. People in small Nevada towns learned not to ask too many questions when triangular silhouettes passed overhead without sound. In this land, myth and machine mingle easily. A sighting in 1955 might be a secret test flight. A sighting in 1965 might be something older, stranger, unbound by human design. The desert accepts both, never choosing sides, holding its silence as steadily as its stars. The Phoenix Squadron flew through that layered silence. They knew their machines were the pinnacle of engineering. Stealth skin, advanced sensors, weapon systems tuned to perfection. Yet what they faced in the sky seemed to carry no seams, no rivets, no trail. It looked less like a machine and more like an idea given form. In this, it echoed both the spirits of old stories and the rumors of modern projects, blurring the line between myth and technology. Some analysts argue that such craft are simply mirrors of human imagination, projected into the sky by stress, expectation, or misinterpreted data. Others argue the opposite, that humanity's machines are themselves echoes, faint imitations of something older, glimpsed and copied across centuries. The truth may lie somewhere between, a conversation between myth and metal, between the memory of sky gods and the secrets of black projects. Standing on the tarmac after the intercept, one of the Phoenix Squadron pilots reportedly muttered a single phrase under his breath. It felt alive. He could not explain what he meant. The craft had made no sound, no move that suggested thought. Yet in its silence, its deliberate presence, there was a quality that machines do not carry. It was not just a target, it was a presence. The desert has always been a mirror. It reflects back what we bring to it: our fears, our ambitions, our secrets. Ancient tribes saw spirits, modern militaries see rivals, pilots see anomalies, and perhaps the truth is that all of these perceptions are valid, each one a facet of the same unfathomable thing. For Phoenix Squadron, the object remained nameless. No report could label it without breaking under the weight of speculation. It was simply unknown. But in that word lies the essence of both myth and machine. Unknown is what the desert has always held. Unknown is what keeps us looking upward, straining against the silence. The Nevada ranges carried the echoes of both Hopi Kachinas and classified stealth projects. And on that night, when an impossible craft floated above them, the desert once again blurred the line, reminding those who chased it that the sky has always belonged as much to mystery as to science. The longer one reflects on encounters like the Phoenix Squadrons, the more the focus begins to shift. At first, it is the craft itself that draws attention: its shape, its speed, its impossible maneuvers. But with time, the question grows quieter, deeper. Perhaps it is not the object that matters most, but the way humans respond to it. What happens when a pilot, trained in the science of flight and the discipline of control, faces something that cannot be caught? What happens when the sharp lines of radar plots and missile telemetry dissolve into impossibility? The answer is rarely about weapons or victories. It is about humility. For all our machines, for all our data, humanity is reminded again and again that the universe is larger than any manual, broader than any doctrine. Each encounter becomes less about what the craft are and more about what they reveal in us: awe, uncertainty, the willingness to admit that not everything has an explanation. Throughout history, these encounters have acted like mirrors. To ancient peoples, they reflected the sacred, the divine, the presence of beings greater than themselves. To modern militaries, they reflect fear of rivals, of vulnerabilities, of the unknown pressing at the edges of control. To ordinary witnesses, they reflect wonder, the reminder that daily life exists beneath skies, capable of surprises far beyond imagination. The Phoenix Squadron's night in Nevada was one more mirror. The craft did not fire. It did not destroy. It did not even flee. It simply existed, indifferent to missiles, immune to interception, content to let itself be witnessed. The real event was not its maneuvers, but the quiet reckoning that unfolded in the cockpits, the realization that the pinnacle of human flight had met something it could not touch. Perhaps this is the purpose of such appearances: not to conquer, not to announce, but to remind us that certainty is fragile, that arrogance in technology is misplaced, and that mystery is not something to be eliminated, but endured. It may be that the objects are visitors, crossing unimaginable distances. It may also be that they are something subtler, like reflections projected by the universe itself, reminders stitched into the fabric of human history to keep us humble. The truth, as always, remains silent, hidden in the same quiet the craft carry with them. For the pilots, the silence is what lingered longest: the absence of sound when the craft shifted, the absence of response when weapons struck empty air, the absence of consequence, as though the laws of cause and effect had been suspended. That silence was not emptiness, it was presence, a weight pressing on the human spirit, urging reflection. As the days turned into weeks, the Phoenix Squadron resumed their duties, checklists, sorties, training cycles. Yet beneath the rhythm of daily routine, each carried the echo of that silence. It was a mirror held up to their skill, their pride, their assumptions, and in that reflection, they saw not defeat, but something gentler, a reminder that the sky is still a place of wonder, not just mastery. And so, in the long history of humanity and the heavens, the lesson repeats. The unknown may not be here to tell us what they are. It may be here to remind us who we are, fragile, curious, and still learning beneath an infinite sky. Chapter 6: Burden of Witness. For Phoenix Squadron, the mission ended the moment their jets touched the runway, but the encounter did not. The craft had gone, the sky was empty, and yet the weight of what they had seen followed them down the taxiways, across the tarmac, and into the long fluorescent-lit halls of the base. In the hours afterward, the pilots were professionals. They filed reports, answered questions, and sat through debriefings with voices steady and calm. Their words were recorded, transcribed, and filed away. On paper, it was an anomaly, a contact that defied engagement, a sequence of maneuvers that exceeded known capability. But the words stripped away the awe, the disbelief, the quiet tremor that lived behind their eyes. When the official work ended, the burden truly began. Phoenix 2 found himself replaying the sight again and again in his mind, the way the object had shifted sideways without moving, the pale pulse of light beneath it, the futility of the missiles. Each time, he felt the same hollow ache in his chest, the realization that what he had trained his whole life to master meant nothing in that moment. He spoke of it to no one. Even among fellow pilots, silence was easier. Phoenix 3 carried the weight differently. In conversations with friends, he avoided details, deflecting questions with vague phrases. Just another training run. Long night, nothing unusual. But his tone was different, quieter. At home, his wife noticed the change before he did. He stared longer at the sky on clear evenings, his coffee cooling in his hands. When she asked what was wrong, he would only shake his head and say, "I don't have the words." For Phoenix 4, the youngest of the squadron, the encounter struck like a fracture. He had grown up believing in the power of technology, in the certainty of human progress. The F-35 was supposed to be untouchable, a machine that placed him at the peak of aviation history. But one night had shown him otherwise. He still flew, still performed his duties, but a new humility crept into his voice, a quiet that his instructors had never taught him. The lead pilot, Phoenix 1, bore the burden with the stoicism of experience. He had seen combat, had known the chaos of missiles and fire, but nothing had prepared him for the silence of that night, the silence of weapons failing against something that did not even acknowledge them. He told himself that his duty was to record, to witness, and to move on. Yet late at night, when the base grew still, he would find himself stepping outside, looking up at the stars, and wondering if the object still hovered somewhere beyond sight, waiting. The burden of witness is not just in memory, it is in the awareness that memory is all one has. There is no proof that satisfies. The data is locked away. The transcripts are reduced to sterile lines of text. The photographs, the telemetry, the black box recordings, all of it belongs to archives the pilots will never see again. What remains is personal, carried inside, impossible to set down. And so their silence deepened, not because they wished to forget, but because they could not explain. The human voice is clumsy when it brushes against the impossible. To describe what they saw was to diminish it, to drag it down into words that could never capture the way the desert sky looked that night, or how missiles bloomed like sparks against the void. The craft left no debris, no sound, no trace, yet for Phoenix Squadron, its presence lingered, a weight in the mind, a reminder that even the most advanced machines of war are fragile when the sky decides to open its mysteries. Silence, once chosen, rarely stays contained. It seeps outward, touching every part of a life. For the pilots of Phoenix Squadron, the weeks after the intercept became lessons in how secrecy reshapes not just memory, but identity. Phoenix 2 discovered it first in the ready room. He was normally quick with jokes, easy with his squad mates, a voice that lightened the tension before sorties. After Nevada, he found himself holding back, less willing to join in the chatter. A few pilots noticed. One asked casually what was wrong. He shrugged and said, "Just tired." But the real answer was that every time talk turned toward training, toward tactics, toward weapons, he felt the ache of futility. He had seen their sharpest arrows turn to dust against the night, and there were no words to make that fit the rhythm of casual conversation. Phoenix 3 encountered it differently. He was due for promotion, his record clean and steady. During interviews with superiors, he was asked to recount recent flights. He gave polished answers, following the script. Yet when questions pressed on the intercept, his voice grew guarded, his eyes lowered. The officers nodded, accepting his words at face value. But afterward he heard whispers, not as confident as before. In a profession where composure was everything, even a flicker of hesitation could cast long shadows. Phoenix 4 felt it most keenly. Young, ambitious, he had entered the squadron brimming with certainty about his future. But after the encounter, his training flights carried a different weight. He flew with precision, but without the same edge of pride. Instructors noted the change. Disciplined but cautious, one wrote in his file. He could not explain that the caution was not fear of error, but awareness of limits. No matter how sharp his reflexes, no matter how advanced the jet, he knew now there were ceilings beyond human reach. The lead pilot, Phoenix 1, bore the silence with practiced dignity. To junior officers, he looked unchanged, steady as ever. But those who had known him longest saw the difference. He lingered longer after briefings, staring at the maps. He walked more often to the edge of the tarmac at night, looking up as though expecting the impossible to return. He spoke little of it, but the distance in his eyes told the story clearly. Beyond the squadron, the silence took other forms. Families felt it at home, a husband quieter at dinner, a father distracted during conversation, a partner awake long after midnight. None of the pilots shared details, bound by classification, but their absence of words spoke louder than any disclosure could. Loved ones sensed the weight, even if they could not name it. Career paths bent subtly under the pressure. Some found themselves overlooked for assignments requiring public confidence. Others were nudged toward roles that demanded less visibility. None of it was punitive, not overt. It was simply the way silence manifests in institutions, a quiet shifting of opportunities, an unspoken recognition that those who carry impossible stories may never fit neatly back into ordinary roles. For the men of Phoenix Squadron, the burden was not only what they had seen, but what they could not share. In a world where identity is built on skill, confidence, and certainty, they now carried an experience that eroded those very foundations. The craft had left no wreckage, no heat signature, no trace to hold. yet it had marked them all the same, not on their bodies, but in their voices, in the pauses that grew longer, in the laughter that came less easily. The silence spread like a shadow, following them into every corner of their lives. And though none of them spoke it aloud, each knew the truth. The real cost of the encounter was not measured in missiles expended or fuel burned. It was measured in the weight of carrying a memory that could not be spoken, a story that lived only behind the eyes of those who had been there. The story of Phoenix Squadron might seem singular. 4 pilots in cutting-edge jets facing a craft beyond comprehension. Yet when their silence is placed beside the testimonies of others, the pattern becomes unmistakable. They were not the first to carry the burden of witness. They will not be the last. For every radar operator who saw blips jump impossibly across a scope, for every civilian who watched lights drift silently above their town, for every soldier who walked into a forest and found an object glowing between trees, the weight is the same, a memory that will not fade, paired with the knowledge that speaking too loudly invites ridicule, dismissal, or worse. History is full of such echoes. The pilots over Washington in 1952, who chased lights across the Capitol skies, only to see them vanish before their eyes. The families beneath the Phoenix lights, who gathered together and stared in collective awe at a formation so vast it blotted out stars. The airmen at Rendlesham, whose calm voices on tape carried the tremor of men recording an event they knew would be doubted. Each returned to their routines afterward. Each carried silence with them, letting it seep into their lives. The cost is rarely spoken of, but it is real. Silence becomes a habit, shaping conversations, relationships, even careers. Witnesses often describe a distance between themselves and others, as if the memory creates a wall invisible but undeniable. They laugh less easily. They speak more carefully. They carry the secret, as though it were a fragile ember, glowing but untouchable. The Phoenix Squadron joined this lineage the moment their missiles bloomed against empty air. Their silence is not an exception, but part of a continuum. The long history of humans encountering something larger than themselves and finding no place for it in ordinary life. The burden is not only disbelief, it is also the erosion of certainty. For a pilot, certainty is survival, certainty in instruments, certainty in training, certainty that physics will behave tomorrow as it did today. When that certainty is shaken, it ripples outward. A man may continue to fly, but a part of him no longer trusts the sky in the same way. And yet there is something profoundly human in this silence. It is not only suppression, it is also reverence. Many witnesses choose not to speak because they sense the inadequacy of words. To describe the impossible too directly feels like flattening it, stripping it of its power. Silence in this sense becomes a form of respect, a way of acknowledging mystery without reducing it. For Phoenix Squadron, as for so many before them, the burden was not a punishment. It was a responsibility. They had been given a glimpse of something that defied technology, training, and even imagination. Their silence, heavy as it was, became part of the story itself, the proof not of weakness, but of awe. And so the lineage continues, from deserts to forests, from oceans to cities, across decades and cultures. People carry the same quiet weight. A craft appears, moves, disappears. The witnesses remain, bound together not by answers, but by silence. The Phoenix Squadron may never know who else shares their burden, but they are not alone. They are part of a human chorus that stretches across generations, a chorus that rarely sings, but always remembers. Chapter 7. The Nevada Night Sky. The desert holds memory differently than people do, where men write reports, file transcripts, and fall silent. The desert simply absorbs. It keeps no documents, leaves no official trail. It remembers in the curve of dunes, in the stillness of lake beds, in the vast canopy of stars that repeat their ancient patterns night after night. Long after Phoenix Squadron returned to base, long after their words were reduced to the sterile language of anomalies, the Nevada night remained as it had been, silent, endless, watching. The desert at night is a paradox. It feels eternal yet fragile. The sand shifts with every breeze, yet the ranges endure as if untouched for millennia. Coyotes call across dry valleys, their voices echoing like fragments of older songs. Above, the stars burn cold and precise, distant fires that have outlasted empires. Against this backdrop, the memory of a glowing craft drifting across the sky feels less like an interruption and more like a continuation, as though the desert has always been a stage for such mysteries. Pilots who have flown over Nevada often remark on the sky's clarity. On moonless nights, the Milky Way cuts across the darkness like a river of light, each star sharp enough to feel within reach. It was into this sky that Phoenix Squadron climbed, chasing the unknown, and it is into this same sky that countless generations have looked, wondering about presences that move in silence. On the ground, the ranges remain restricted, their fences marked by weathered signs warning trespassers to keep away. The signs mention nothing of mysteries. They speak only of security, of danger, of the laws of man. Yet above those fences, the laws of man sometimes bend. Imagine standing alone on the desert floor the night of the intercept. You would have seen nothing of the jets at first, only faint streaks of heat and the low roar carried by the wind. But if you had looked higher, you might have glimpsed a shimmer in the sky, a glow without source, moving without sound. To you, it would have seemed both near and impossibly distant, both solid and unreal. And then it would have been gone. The silence would have returned, the stars unchanged, the desert indifferent, but in your memory the image would remain, etched deeper than any ordinary night sky. This is how the desert holds its secrets, not in archives, but in impressions. For every official silence, there is a landscape that remembers. The sand does not forget the footfalls of those who chase the impossible. The mountains do not forget the roar of jets. The stars do not forget the brief shimmer of light that appeared among them. For Phoenix Squadron, the burden of witness was heavy, but for the desert it was only another night. It had seen mysteries before, and it will see them again. The silence is not absence here. It is continuity, the way the land carries forward every story, blending human memory into a timeless rhythm. So the Nevada sky remains, wide, silent, waiting. Beneath it, jets will continue to climb, and watchers will continue to record. And every so often something will appear, not to answer, not to explain, but simply to remind. In the great silence of the desert, the memory of Phoenix Squadron's intercept has joined a chorus of older echoes. The sky has kept its secret. The land has accepted its silence. And humanity, as always, is left to wonder. The Nevada desert has always carried two faces. One belongs to the earth itself, ridges carved by ancient seas, valleys scattered with salt flats, sky so wide it seems to rest on the horizon like a great dome. The other belongs to the secrets humanity has draped across it. Airstrips hidden in dry lake beds, radar towers rising like steel sentinels, rumors that slip across county lines, and settle in roadside diners. The Phoenix Squadron's encounter fits into both phases at once. It was a military event, logged with precision, captured in instruments, bound by protocol. Yet it was also mythic, something that belongs as much to folklore as to reports. The desert makes little distinction between the two. It accepts the classified and the whispered alike, folding them into its silence. At night, the landscape amplifies this duality. Drive the long stretches of Highway 375, sometimes called the extraterrestrial highway, and you will see why. On one side, the mountains rise black and jagged against the stars. On the other, the basins stretch flat and endless, lit only by the faint glow of distant towns. Billboards with alien caricatures stand beside fences marked with government warnings. Curiosity shops sell keychains shaped like saucers. Meanwhile, a few miles away, radar dishes sweep the sky in classified arcs, logging contacts no one will ever read. In this place, folklore and secrecy are not opposites. They are partners. One feeds the other. The absence of official answers breeds stories. The persistence of stories sustains secrecy. It is a cycle as old as the desert itself. On the night of the intercept, the craft that Phoenix Squadron chased became part of that cycle. For the pilots, it was a shock. Missiles detonating against nothing, physics unraveling. For the desert, it was familiar. Another light against the stars, another whisper to be carried across the sands, another secret folded into silence. The desert has seen other mysteries too. Test pilots in the 1960s spoke of triangular shadows gliding without sound. Ranchers told of silver discs hovering low over the sagebrush. Truckers on lonely highways described lights pacing their rigs before vanishing into the horizon. Some of these stories found their way into archives, others dissolved into campfire tales, yet all share the same shape, a fleeting glimpse of something that refuses to be pinned down. The Phoenix Squadron's night was different only in scale. Their jets were faster, their instruments sharper, their training deeper, yet their conclusion was the same as that of the rancher, the trucker, the witness on a roadside. They had seen something that would not yield to explanation, something that slipped between technology and myth, as much a presence as an object. Above it all, the stars looked on, cold, steady, indifferent. To them, the intercept was nothing, a brief flicker against aeons of silence. And yet for those beneath the stars, the memory was profound. In the weeks that followed, when Phoenix Squadron's encounter was reduced to files and classifications, the desert still held it. The sands that heard the roar of afterburners remembered. The mountains that reflected the glow of detonating missiles remembered. The sky that hosted the impossible craft remembered. And in that way, Nevada itself became part of the testimony, not in words or reports, but in presence. The land carries its secrets the way stone carries time, quietly without need for explanation, content to let mystery rest. So when one speaks of the Phoenix Squadron Intercept, it is not only a story of jets and pilots, it is also a story of place, of a desert that has always blurred the line between human invention and cosmic mystery, between classified and sacred, between silence and story. In the Nevada night, everything becomes part of the same atmosphere. Myths told by tribes, experiments tested by engineers, lights chased by pilots, secrets whispered in the dark. And in that atmosphere, the sky feels both closer and more unreachable than ever before. By the time dawn touched the Nevada horizon, The night of the intercept had already begun to fade into memory. The desert floor shimmered faintly with the first warmth of sunlight, and the stars that had borne witness slipped quietly into the pale sky. To the world beyond the fences, it was only another morning. To Phoenix Squadron, it was the continuation of a silence they would carry long after wheels touched the runway. The desert itself seemed unchanged. Dust lifted in the wind as it always had. Jackrabbits darted across scrub, wary of hawks overhead. The dry air smelled of sage and stone. Nothing in the landscape bore the slightest trace of what had unfolded above it hours before. And perhaps that was the truest reminder. Mysteries leave no footprints. They arrive, they dazzle, they vanish, and the earth carries on indifferent. For the pilots, however, the silence was not indifference. It was weight. Each carried it differently. One in restless dreams, one in long stares at the stars, one in careful words spoken less freely than before. But together they shared the bond of knowing what it meant to face the impossible and return with nothing but memory. Such bonds rarely appear in official records. They exist in sidelong glances, in pauses during conversation, in the unspoken recognition between those who shared the sky that night. It is a bond made not of triumph, but of awe, and awe is heavier than victory. Awe does not fade with the turning of days. The Nevada sky has always been a keeper of awe. Tribes who once roamed its valleys looked upward and saw gods. Settlers who crossed its deserts saw omens. Soldiers, pilots, engineers. Each generation layered its own interpretations upon the same stars. Phoenix Squadron's story is only the newest layer, written not in stone or ink, but in silence. What lingers most is not the chase, nor the missiles, nor even the glowing craft itself. What lingers is the quiet afterward, the hush of turbines winding down, the stillness of debriefing rooms, the heavy calm of knowing they had touched the edge of something vast and unknowable. That silence was not absence, it was presence, a presence that pressed against the edges of language and refused to be reduced to words. And so the story of Phoenix Squadron settles into the desert like all stories before it, not as a headline, not as a declaration, but as another whisper added to the long chorus of Nevada nights. The desert will keep it, as it keeps all mysteries, until another generation looks up and finds themselves chasing lights that move without wings, without sound, without explanation. For those listening now, drifting into the slow rhythm of sleep, let the image remain not of fire or pursuit, but of the desert sky at rest, wide, silent, endlessly patient, a canvas upon which mystery writes itself only briefly, before fading again into stillness. The encounter has ended, the silence remains, and beneath that silence, perhaps, lies the reminder that mystery itself is a gift, not to be solved tonight, but to be carried gently into dreams. The desert night has closed its curtain. The stars have wheeled on in their endless arcs, and the story of the Phoenix Squadron settles into silence, becoming one more whisper in the long tapestry of mysteries held by the Nevada sky. What remains is not the clash of machines, not the fire of missiles streaking upward, but the stillness that followed. The object, untouched and unmoved, drifted away without explanation. The jets, the pinnacle of human flight, returned to base carrying nothing more than memory. And that memory, as it always has in such encounters, became heavier than any wreckage could have been. The pattern is familiar now. Witnesses see, instruments record, and afterward, silence presses down like a second sky. But within that silence, there is no emptiness. There is presence. Presence in the way the desert remembers, carrying stories like shadows across its ridges. Presence in the way the pilots carry their awe, quietly, folded into pauses, into the space between words. Presence in the way we, listening, feel a hush settle over us, as though the mystery itself has drifted close enough to touch. And so, tonight, let us rest in that hush. Not every question needs to be answered. Not every light in the sky needs to be named. There is peace in mystery, a gentleness in admitting that the universe is larger than our grasp. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Imagine again the desert, vast and open, cooled by the breath of night. The sand stretches endlessly, quiet beneath the stars. A faint wind stirs the sagebrush, carrying with it the scent of stone and dust. Coyotes call distantly, their voices fading into the silence. Above, the heavens remain, vast and watchful, filled with stars so steady they seem eternal. Somewhere within that sky, perhaps, another craft moves in silence, or perhaps not. It does not matter. What matters is the stillness it leaves behind, the quiet reminder that wonder is always within reach. The Phoenix Squadron will go on with their lives. They will fly again. They will laugh again. They will sit with their families and feel the rhythm of ordinary days. Yet each will carry a private star inside, a memory of a night when they chased the impossible and touched the edge of mystery. That memory will never fade. It will live within them like a secret constellation, guiding them quietly even when words fail. And in truth, we all carry such constellations, moments of awe, moments when the world felt larger, stranger, more beautiful than we had known. They may not be written in reports. They may never be shared aloud, but they live within us, shaping who we are, reminding us that life is not only routine but also wonder. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let this story become one of your constellations. Let the silence of the desert wrap around you, soft as a blanket. Let the stars above Nevada remind you that the sky has always held mysteries, and always will. There is no need to solve them now. There is no need to reach for answers. The questions can wait. The wonder can rest quietly with you. Breathe slowly. Let your thoughts grow gentle. Feel the heaviness of your body sinking into the bed, the quiet rhythm of your heart, steady as the sweep of radar across a screen. The night holds you, just as it held the desert, just as it held the Phoenix Squadron, safe, calm, surrounded by mystery, yet free from fear. If dreams come, let them be filled with stars. Let them carry you across silent skies, where awe outweighs explanation, where presence outweighs proof, where the only sound is the hush of the infinite. And if the morning brings questions, let them arrive gently. The mystery will still be there, waiting, carried in silence like a gift. For now, rest. The desert sleeps, the sky watches, and you too are part of the silence. Good night.